All right. Hello, everyone. My name is Greg Hartnett. I'm an engineering manager.
Hi, I'm Paul O'Sullivan. I'm the CEO at Skellig.
Yeah, very good. We are going to be talking today about company culture um, and the ins and outs of everything that makes a great company culture, and also, what might make a bad company culture. Um, and then just how do we spread the Skellig values and the Skellig culture, because I feel like we have a pretty good one here, around to not just our clients, but also people we partner with.
Well, like good is subjective as well. Like it's good for us, and then I think being good at culture, I think, is being kind of maybe self-aware. Like, what does the organization, what do we as a collective, if we were a village, what do we value? Do we value corn and wheat, and the potato guys over there, we don't value them, or they value potatoes? Both are fine and relevant. It's just I think being very clear and intentional about what you stand for, and that can help you focus then as an organization. So I think having a good culture is more just being clear about who you are as a collective, what you stand for, and what could help someone excel. So the hope is that if you're clear enough about it and you publicize it, then people that might enjoy that kind of culture, they become attracted to that company, and they say, "Oh, I'd like to be part of that." And then we win because we get someone that can help us advance our ideas. And the thing about culture is, if we're enabling um, a diverse set of opinions, then there's an element of um, treating people with respect, and then enabling a healthy discussion then around what's the right idea, how do you get the right idea to the top. Then that's how I think about it anyway. Is that how you think about makes a good culture? Like, it's something that either enables you and you like it, or you hate it and you want to leave, but someone else might love what you hated, I guess, is what I was trying to say.
Yeah, I guess, there is an opinion of what you're looking for in a company culture. Like some people may excel in a very corporate, rigid kind of advancement like culture, and someone may do better in a more casual, laid back culture where you can talk to anyone as I guess a peer or an equal, right?
So just before we get into it too deep, Greg, I know we're here going to talk a little bit about company culture today, but just to mention really quick, bit of a shout out to Amy Williams and some of the support people behind Amy that helped pull together a really nice demo for an event in Boston with Hive MQ. I know there's a lot of uh, like-minded, forward-thinking individuals and companies at the event, and Amy really enjoyed it, and Bill Lorenz was there, a couple of other people were there, and I know they had a lot of good things to say about how it went. So I
Excellent.
just
That can be really exciting, I think, to surround yourself about people that are equally as passionate as you are about whatever topic it is for whatever event you're attending to. But that's really nice. Do
yep.
you find that I don't know when the last time you've been to an event like that, but do you find sometimes you'll go to these events, there'll be a ton of people very excited about collectively doing the same thing? This, for example, this is
Mhm.
4-0, right?
Yep.
um but then once everyone disperses and returns back to their places of work, that energy can slowly die off, so you're not necessarily carrying that momentum and all that excitement that might have been at that event back to
you
your workplace.
Yeah, you are if you're not working on it. Thankfully, Amy and the gang, they are working on it, so that does help. Like, some of the clients they're involved with, they're using the Hive
Right.
MQ broker, and you know it's really relevant to their day to day right now. So what's cool about events like that then is you get to have like-minded people come together that are working on similar problems. Maybe someone's ahead on some aspect, maybe someone's behind, but you're sharing ideas. And 4.0 is new to the industry, and it's important to kind of collaborate as you're figuring stuff out. So trying to be as authentic as possible about what the strengths and weaknesses of everything is, so that we can advance things.
But
So
fortunately, we have a team like Amy and Bill that can work together and feed off each other's energy, like within Skellig. But not everyone has that. Like, I'm sure people went to this event that went by themselves or solo, and now they're going back to their places of work, maybe trying to bring that same energy and excitement.
yep,
But for the people that weren't there, right, that can be a very challenging thing to do. And I feel like it's particularly relevant in the life sciences industry. Like, we were
it
having a
is.
conversation earlier about like coming back, like seeing some new piece of software or some new technology, and then you bring it back to your place of work and you're trying to tell your buddy, and before their eyes glaze over, or maybe while their eyes glaze over, they say, well, how are we going to validate that? And you're like, oh, yeah, I guess. And then it just dies. Like, that so far in my career has always been the I don't know if you want to call it red tape, or like, that's been the biggest roadblock, where someone will say, well, how are we going to validate it? And if you can't answer that in 5 seconds, it's like the conversation's automatically over. Maybe you can go home and think about it, and then you come up with some good ideas. But I think it is so difficult to, on the spot, I don't want to say win that argument, but on the spot, like, have a good answer for like
Yep,
how you're going to validate it to keep the conversation and excitement going. So,
I
um,
agree.
do you tend to think that the life sciences industry, I guess, drags its feet when it
Hmm.
comes to um, 4.0 and maybe just some of this forward thinking ideas?
Good question. Um, I think it's complicated. Like, okay, let me put it this way. So, 4.0 is not, or sorry, life sciences is not the fastest at adopting technology, right? And that's like the common kind of frustration. But, I don't know that it's a frustration more so than it's just, I think it's kind of a good thing. We need to prove things out.
Mm-hmm.
Um, And when I came across the Walker Reynolds stuff, the unified namespace and all this 4.0 and the way he was thinking and talking about 4.0, I was like, oh my God, we need this in life sciences. And and that's a big lift, because you can't just you do the training and you kind of get a sense of like, okay, there's all these new technologies, they're thinking this way, they're doing this, that, the other thing with data. But how you show someone, and then how do you stand over that as like a credible solution? And Walker and his experiences have allowed him to leverage a client base, where he's done it previously, etc. And as we're building that with Skellig, that's where I think the questions come up around life sciences. Okay, so if you bring something in and it's new, number one, what problem is it solving, that we don't have a solution for right now? And how do you validate that? Is it validatable? Is it Part 11 compliant? Is everything, if you're storing information that you're going to make a GMP decision on, um, is that, you know, is that correct? Like, can you edit that? So I think things like that have to be proven and shown. I'm not saying the unified namespace it's being widely adapted, right? So, but part of that is it's this new approach to data, but I think it's opening the door for a lot of new platforms to come in with a 4.0 mindset and help us solve more plant floor problems, and that's incredibly exciting. But I think part of what we need to do is help the industry see how to contextualize their problems in light of a cohesive strategy around these new platforms. You know.
Where do you even start to make that cohesive strategy? Because I think that goes with what I was saying before. Like, it's so easy to cut off a conversation with some kind of statement like,
Yep.
well, how are you going to validate that? But that's just an example. Like, I'm sure there's a million other questions. So it's like you almost need to have a list of responses for like show stopping comments in a way.
Yeah.
And
Well, you
is
need to
that
be
what
a
you need?
yeah.
Is that what you mean by like cohesive strategy? Is more or less like making sure you have
Um,
boxes checked for, or a response for those, I guess, show stopping.
I, okay. My opinion on the whole thing is that like we're right where we need to be in terms of early doors on education, and these things they have a sense of urgency to them, but you also can't rush them. So
Mm-hmm.
people need to know more about 4.0. They need help to understand, is this relevant to me now? Is this relevant to me in 5 years? Our best thinking on the idea right now is, okay, how do you take like Walker's ideas and what Tulip's doing and Hive MQ, all these things that are these platforms and you know these thought leaders that are helping to drive change, and how do you put it together in a way that a life sciences manufacturer or someone within a life sciences manufacturer can take a look at that and say, okay, if I'm showing up here with an open mind, can you tell me how this is going to be? Can I validate this? Number one, because we can't go very far if we can't do that. I don't care if it's cheaper, more expensive, doesn't matter. If I can't get through that stage gate, then we don't really have a conversation. So I think showing how you validate it, showing how it's put together, how data is moved, how these components in a factory of the future can work together. Who takes responsibility for these components? How much is on the end user in terms of figuring out um, how to take responsibility for it? And like the way, I don't want to misrepresent Walker's ideas here, but like I think the way he talks about it to address that is the end client educating themselves, and I think that's really relevant, and it's often a missing component. There's so much education needed before you can really step into a lot of this, and he talks about like doing smaller smaller projects that then scale into a larger strategy. And his famous line is like, digital transformation, it's a strategy, not a project. And i I think people often misunderstand that, like, oh well, what's the end game? Is the end game you bring in Hive MQ and a bunch of other things and now you're transformed? And it's
Mm-hmm.
not. It's really a way of working. And it's like these are some of the tools you may use, but like, and they'll help you along your journey, but it's your strategy, it's your people approach. That's how you understand how it all comes together. That's such a critical component. And I think Walker's kind of right when he says you can't really outsource all of that. So that's why I think we are exactly where we are right now, because the old model is like, well, let's put a factory together, let's choose what our DCS is, let's choose what our MES is, what's our historian or system of record, a couple of other choices, and then away we go. And longer term, then it's a pretty static facility, and you make some changes so you have your automation team and they support it. But now we're looking at like something that's much more dynamic. Um, and I don't know that we collectively, life sciences hasn't agreed on a cohesive strategy on how to approach the problem. Um,
I mean, I've only ever been in life sciences, so it would be, I think, a great example to read about and educate myself on an industry that maybe does it well, right? And then analyze, like, okay, why does it do it well? Is it because there isn't this one corporation that has has all the knowledge and makes it proprietary, and then um you have to only work through them and they become a major bottleneck in distributing information or educating people, or is it something else entirely? I know,
Hmm.
I feel like a lot of times in the life sciences industry, um, whenever you are seeking information on how something works, they're like, "Oh, we'll tell you, but like fill out this contact information sheet first, and then
Yep.
someone will call you in a couple days and tell you exactly how much that thing costs, or we'll put you in touch with a technical person." And then I don't know, they just like
Yep.
steal your information or something.
No, but it's the old way, and I think there's a for for me. Look, I'm in management now, so I'm more looking at the mindsets of the people more so than the
Yeah,
technology. Like, you know, um, there was a client over the weekend. He posted this thing, and he was like, "Oh, Paul O'Sullivan, Walker, John McKeown, what do you guys think?" And clearly, it's a very technical oriented question. And honestly, I don't feel like that I have the technical capability to address that comment. So
right,
thankfully, Walker answered it, and I was like, "Okay, cool." But I don't want to take a run at something like that. That's outside of my circle of competence, I would say.
mm-hmm,
But I do want to know enough about 4.0 and the mindsets of the people involved in it to know how to cobble something together that's really going to work. Um, I'm CEO, management all day. Don't do any technical work anymore. So my job is to build the stage, not to perform on it.
right.
And says himself on YouTube
Well,
with you. But what I mean by that is like where I'm going with that comment is I think there's a generosity needed that you don't see in the last 30 years around knowledge because knowledge has been power from a consulting standpoint, from a platform standpoint. How much does it cost? That's a tricky one to answer, right? Who are you? Who's asking? It all depends. There's a lot to that. And that really doesn't speak to transparency. It doesn't speak to openness. And I think the industry 4.0, while there are some there's a technological precedent for it, the people aspect of it and the mindset of those individuals is the real power in the movement. Like, and Walker often compares, um, 4.0 to, look, it's just going to be like making a factory work like your smartphone. And then, you can draw parallels to how we've technically, we have digitally transformed as a society via the smartphone. But, you walk into a facility, then you're a human being who can no longer solve all your own problems from a work perspective. Now you are restricted access to data, whereas you step outside and you want to decide where to go for lunch or to book a plane ticket somewhere or get another job. You have all the world's information at your fingertips, except when you're
mm-hmm,
in the job, on the plant floor. Now you've got restrictions and not restrictions in terms of like you're not supposed to know this proprietary HR information, restrictions in terms of everything's monetized, licensed by third parties. You might not even know the system exists. You might not even know that data exists. There's a lot of complexity and barriers. I think the 4.0 mindset is really speaking to people that don't accept that anymore and they're looking to have those barriers actively removed. And if you're a platform that's holding power or you're holding information about what value you bring until someone pays and then they're stuck with what you've sold them. Um, that's that's becoming less and less accepted the further we get into 4.0.
I've never been to one of these events like Hive MQ, but you were talking about platforms withholding information. Probably that's a little bit more in the tech space rather than in the people space, but just in terms of like being able to collaborate and share experiences to advance the 4.0 culture, are these events the best thing out there for that, or
It
is there more?
depends.
I kind of, my brain got on this based off of what you're saying about like, oh, a smartphone. Now I have like the world's information at my fingertips, right?
Hmm.
And I'm thinking more, a little bit more generally, less about the tech and about
Yeah, it's
spreading
not. Yeah,
information and having.
I mean, look, the conferences are cool, and traditionally Skellig hasn't done a lot of going to conferences because I haven't prioritized it. And now
Mm,
there's others in leadership, and they're really valuing conferences, and that's fantastic. Um, I have a small family, and I don't really I go visit clients or I go visit, you know, when, but usually I'm in and out pretty quick, and I don't attend a lot of events just because you know, I value being able to pick up the kid from school and drop them off and all that kind of stuff, and just be around. But that's the stage of life I'm at. So,
hmm
but does that hold me back from understanding how a factory of the future should or could work? I don't think it should or needs to. And I consume a lot, like obviously I consume Walker's content, but there's a lot of other stuff out there too. I think they're great, but I don't think they're the only way you can consume knowledge about the
mm.
industry. 4.0, why is it relevant? Why am I so obsessed with it? Why don't I never? Why do I never stop talking about 4.0? Because I think we're all pretty flat-footed, and when you're on the plant floor, like I feel like you and I both were DCS engineers, and we both worked on the same stuff, and nothing changed for all of my career. Now everything is kind of changing, and because I'm in the position I'm in, I kind of get to see what might be coming. And I'm not saying there's no legacy DCS projects coming. There are, but you see the general patterns. We need to be ready for that. And that's why I'm so obsessed about it. But I think to help life sciences adapt it as an industry, Skellig and others maybe like us, we need to do more to demonstrate capabilities, show and tell a lot more, and just try to help the collective kind of understand and box off like, okay, what's true in this new world, what's wrong with our legacy approaches, because in a lot of ways they work incredibly well. Why are you trying to get rid of them?
There's two strategies in my mind, and you can have a mixture of both, I suppose. And I think one of them is exactly what you're saying, like leading by example, showing what is possible. And then the second strategy is pointing out what's wrong with the existing models or what we're currently doing. I feel like you can do one or the other. I think if you only point out what's wrong with what we're currently doing, you don't have success. You're just not a problem solver at that point, just a critic, right?
Yep.
Whereas if you're only showing, hey, what's possible, you're maybe not providing the context as to why this is better. So I guess you do need to do a little bit of both
Hmm.
to show why you're successful. I want to go back to something you said earlier about like you're a person that sets a stage, but you're not the performer on the stage. And I
Hmm.
think this is a little bit relevant to what I'm saying about leading by example. I do think if you're going to be building a stage, you do need to have some kind of context of what is done on that stage.
Hmm.
Otherwise, you're just going to build too blank of an NV canvas that
Yep.
that
Yep.
you're not going to get that standardization of what to do on that stage. Whereas if you do have the background and do have some of the technical know-how to say, oh, this feature is going to be useful and this feature is going to be useful, you're going to end up building a much better stage
Right.
for the industry, I guess, to dance on.
Yep. So just on that line, because I use it a lot, but it's not an original. I stole it from a book called Creativity Inc. by a
Mm.
guy called Ed Catmull, and I bet you don't know what company he's CEO of.
No, I don't.
Yep, he's the CEO of Pixar, and he has been. I don't know if he still is actually. I should Google that, but um, he was anyway. And but Steve Jobs is often like associated a lot with Pixar and how it developed, or um, but Ed Catmull is the guy that coined that line. And Creativity Inc. is a book. I love the book, but like I haven't read it in years, but it's really foundational in terms of this idea of like creating a place for creatives and people to share ideas in an iterative fashion, and keep the outcome and serve the story. And as you would evolve things creatively, you learn stuff, and then new ideas emerge. And how do you create something where the best ideas rise to the top regardless of who has them? That's quite complicated to pull off, and you can't
Mm,
pull it off with a military structure where like we've solved something, here it is. you know um and I think where the industry is, life sciences right now, is we're coming alive to the potential of 4.0. We're looking at it, and in true life sciences fashion, we have to do stuff that's well thought through, proven, validatable, all these kinds of terms. And I think we're kind of right where, you know, do I wish we were further ahead? Of course, but we are where we are. And people, manufacturers are asking about 4.0. They're talking about it, they're educating themselves on it. Honestly, I've seen more from manufacturers and end clients than I have from integrators,
mm.
and
Why do you
engineers.
think that is? Is that because they're closer to the problem, or that
I
they're
don't
the ones
know.
coming up with their own needs?
I should have a better answer for this question actually, but
You don't need to know the answer, but we can certainly brainstorm why that
yeah.
might be, right?
Um, it's a pattern I've recognized for sure.
Yeah.
Like the clients are more ahead. I think it's just because we've gotten so used. It's a very forgivable situation to be in. Like it's been the same way for like 30 years. Nothing's
Hmm.
changed. Why should 4.0 be any different? It's just going to be the next thing, like virtualizing a server. Someone will figure it out, and it's just a thing, and we'll like I remember when virtualization was a thing, and um, when it first came out, you're like everyone would say, "Oh my God, no, no, no way! We have to have physical servers in life sciences and in the OT space." And then 2 years later, everything was virtual, and it was just a couple of laggards that were like still fighting the fight. But 4.0 is quite different. It's more all consuming, and it's not just a little technology choice. Like you put in a Hive MQ broker, you're not now a 4.0 enterprise. It's a very complicated step change in evolutionary way of working. And there's very few great examples in any industry right now, um, that I know of. The public ones that are heavily touted and that I wish I could learn a lot more about is Tesla and Amazon. They seem to do a great job of um, you know having the right approach from a 4.0 perspective. Um, and I think if you're trying to figure out, well, what's ideal look like, and I'm a life sciences manufacturer, I think it's you got to look at places like Tesla. Um,
Mm.
but I don't know anyone in life sciences. There's no one in life sciences that I know of that's like, oh my God, look at them. They're so far ahead. They've nailed it.
Yeah.
I think we have a huge amount of legacy problems and um, debt, kind of dogma to throw off before we can really pull away.
Is it like generational resistance to change?
There's a whole subset of the economy around like being a supplier to life sciences, from platforms, equipment suppliers, the OEMs that have evolved to have their own automation on the skid, and then that they consider that their IP or intellectual property.
Hmm.
Walker's team, 4.0 Solutions, they put out a video recently where it's Jim Farley, the CEO of Ford, going like, "Yeah, we can't catch Tesla, and here's why." And it's because when you look inside our cars, we can't just consolidate our data to solve problems, and we can't rewrite that software because Bosch owns this component, and this other
Mm.
company owns that component. And you can see, and the way Walker's team are championed, they're like, look at the penny dropping for the legacy automaker. But we haven't had that moment in life sciences yet. There's no CEO from insert favorite big large biotech here saying like, but it's all over cell and gene therapy. If you do any cell and gene therapy project, it's going to be like, okay, who's going to supply our equipment? And the scientists want this kind of bioreactor, and they want the control that comes with it, and they don't care that it's a locked in um, piece of intellectual property. They're like, that's the way we did it in the tech transfer in the lab, and or that's the way we want to tech transfer it over. So I think there's problems like that throughout life sciences that are very. Um, I think you can draw parallels with like the auto industry in some regard, and point to situations like that where um, those kinds of questions have to be asked. And I think the first stage is where we're at now. Really, is early on the manufacturers themselves saying, what is all this 4.0 technology stuff? Okay, so there's a bunch of new platforms. That sounds scary. How are we going to adapt those into our factory? Are we going to build a new factory? Um, what's it all for? What should our strategy be? Well, your strategy should be centered around data, and even that statement, I don't think is very well understood. I think a lot of people are saying it, but like, I don't know. I'm saying this as someone that I feel like I could hear that. I knew it sounded good, but it took me years. And I think
Hmm.
partly maybe because I'm a little older and I've been in the industry a while, so I've learned the older way of doing it. So then that makes it harder. Um, I hope this is kind of making sense. I'm just trying to talk about
No, it
the
is.
agonizing internal struggle of like, how do you
Yeah.
understand how to apply these new technologies and these new things? Or maybe even to your original question, which you've probably forgotten now, which is how do you build a stage? So I feel like in my position, I need to know enough about this new stuff and how to identify and allocate energy and permission towards people with that mindset that want to show and tell how to solve problems in this new way. And that's what I'm looking at when I'm thinking about the infrastructure and what's what do you platform. And then there can be people with the right technical ideas, but they're not collaborators. So then you've got to make that judgment call of like, how do you build something that's going to scale well? So, individuals, and this is where culture becomes such an important part of it. Who's gamifying information? Who's being very generous and open with their ideas, and trusting um, that by doing the right thing, it'll all work out in the end. It's a
Yeah.
really interesting. I love it, but it's a really fascinating problem. And from my perspective, I'm not going to solve the whole lot of it. Nobody is, but my little part in it is going to be, I think, just trying to figure out with Jennifer Jones and with the rest of you guys, like yourself, Andrew, go down the list of management, too long to name, but like essentially Skellig management, like how are we going to do our little part in our corner of life sciences to enable the adoption of these technologies to
Right.
solve operational problems.
I think the Skellig culture and the Skellig way has always been to be very open with what we're doing, to be very transparent with our data. Being genuine and transparent has always done well for us, and I think it has really got our names out there and makes people want to work with us. But if I had any inner critic of it, it would be, part of me is like, oh well, do nice people finish last
Yep.
because we're being so giving with what we're doing. If Skellig was making a product and we were giving away all of our secrets, someone would beat us to market that had more revenue and more backing
Hmm.
and just a stronger team to launch something, right? I think we would lose in that scenario. But as a consultant in trying to guide our clients to make great decisions,
I know what you're trying to
you can't
say.
you can't lose there.
I
Yeah,
know what you're trying
kind
to
of.
say. Can I take a run at that one?
Please do.
There's transparency and there's idea sharing. If we like, so let's look at the thing we're trying to do at the moment. Like we're trying to do the virtual plant, right? And you know, we're going to evolve that, right? So the idea is like you start with a virtual plant, that kind of says, okay, here's how we implement a unified namespace. Here's how we implement insert piece of technology here. And that's going to evolve over time. It'll probably evolve into multiple factories. So as we kind
Mm-hmm.
of change the degree of emphasis, just like the early days of the computer. Okay, it was a computer first, but then there was a personal computer, there was a server at work, there was a, and they're all computer, but they've different degrees of emphasis. I could see the same thing with the virtual plant where it's an mRNA example. This is how if you gave us a couple of $1 million to build you a factory to do mRNA, this is how we would do it. If you gave us a couple of $1 million to do cell and gene therapy, this is how we would do it. And I think that's what this can evolve to, and it forces us as engineers to do our own thinking about what do we recommend, where do we draw the line, how do we put something out into the world as like this is what we stand for, this is what we would stand over, and this is what we recommend. And then of course there's inherent risk in that, that like, oh, competitor just copy paste, yep, do this, yep, the best example I can think of to describe the philosophy to counteract that kind of thinking is that it's about kind of staying ahead. You're not static, and you figure something out and then you improve upon that. But you're sharing
Mm-hmm.
you're sharing out what you've figured out. Kind of like in the same way there's a line around like SaaS product development. You don't approach the market saying like let's create some non-competes and all these kinds of things, and that's not really where the safety is by patenting something. The safety is in by staying ahead with features. So
Mm.
keep building new features, keep adding to it. That's what keeps you relevant. And I think the same is true here. So I'm not really scared that like we'll educate the competition on what a unified namespace is important. Yeah, it is, and we can share our best thinking in a genuine sense and say we could stand over this and you can see it, um, but it doesn't mean we won't be hired because someone
Mm-hmm.
$10 cheaper than us is now going to just steal those ideas. It takes a lot to craft and get to that stage of making that recommendation. And I think what you're going to see with 4.0 is that these choices you need to have the right mindset. You need to invest in you need to understand how you got to the answer you got to, so that if any parameters change, that you can adapt and grow with that. So I think
Right.
that's what would keep us relevant and hired, so to speak. So the way I see it is like we'll continue to broaden what we can give away access to,
Yeah.
and yeah, competitors will see it, and people starting new companies will see it, but
I like I like the idea and the thought about like staying ahead, and that's where your competitive advantage
mhm,
is in. Do you think with like a company like Skellig, obviously we're a very small company compared to some of our
mhm.
competitors, in 4.0 being such a broad space, do you think it's kind of a risk to be tackling such a broad topic while also actively trying to like stay ahead? Like, wouldn't it be better to pick a small slice of the 4.0 area and saying this is the area we're going to be competitive in and try to,
Yeah.
you know,
My answer to that,
be
I'm trying to
masters of
be
that? Yeah.
technically led by the nose by the people that
Right.
are figuring stuff out, how to create value on the technical side, and then it works back to someone in my position. We enable this, we enable that,
Mm-hmm.
we disable something else because it's no longer relevant or worthy of investment. Like MES platforms, like there was some of those we were, there's some next gen ones, but it seems like Tulip's kind of pulling ahead of the pack in a large way. So it's like, interesting. So then strategically, what are we doing about that? I think it's about the mindset of um, just figuring out how to create value. That's the best way to answer it. And there's a large amount of risk to not just picking something, but the way that I think the healthiest way I can think about it is to approach it like Steve Jobs approached Apple, or there's a lot of other examples. Even like Tesla is kind of structured like this as well, where it's a slew of startups in a
Mm-hmm.
chain. It's the philosophy that I'm leaning into as we go into 4.0, where like there's all these little opportunities within 4.0, and as you start to recognize patterns where there's money changing hands, there's value being created in this segment. How are you being relevant and useful? And does that align with like our overall strategy? And how do you keep the two of them square? Maybe said in a
Mm-hmm.
more plain fashion. I'm hoping that Skellig can stay relevant as the industry adapts to 4.0. How do we be useful in the conversation? Involves a lot of listening. What are the best thought leaders and tech leaders like Walker and a bunch of others? What are they saying is relevant? What are they saying we should be doing? And how do we marry that with what the clients say is a problem and what they need and what they're yearning for? And how do we marry those two in a practical sense and say, yeah, we can help solve this. This is a little immature over here, but we think this is going to be where it goes. And you just be very honest, and you risk assess, and you try to be as relevant as possible, knowing that you're playing a long game where trust is really the only currency that will keep you safe. And the only way to have trust is to tell the truth. So from a practical standpoint, we'll all be fine if we focus on creating value by telling the truth and just doing the simple things really well and understanding the the limits of our competence. Do we really know that's true? Have we proved it out? And that's where the virtual plant comes in then. So that's
Right.
the strategy from a Skellig standpoint in a nutshell. Let's build it out first before we start saying anything about it or recommending it to a client. And then let's just be as open and as honest as possible about like what we see as the pluses and minuses, because we are going to need a lot of input from the clients. And I've had some of these conversations with clients, like where it's like, yeah, we're going this direction because, there's a lot of other people going this direction, but here are the problems. Yeah, we see those too. And, you know, let's let's make sure the platform knows about this, and let's make sure as an implementation team we know about these shortcomings and that we're engineering around them.
No, that's very well said.
Okay.
I think my follow up comment to that was like, yeah, do you feel like it's important that our clients and our partners kind of share that same Skellig value of like openness and honesty, and trust in order to, I guess, like be collaborative and build the better tomorrow, for a lack of a better term.
I think so.
Yeah.
I think so.
Culture usually starts at the top, and rotten leadership and management will spoil a company's culture so easily.
Hmm.
So, how do each of us model the Skellig way? How I model the Skellig way is I approach all the problems I cause on a day-to-day basis without is that funny?
The problems you cause. Yeah.
Oh, did I say that I cause?
Yeah.
Oh, the problems I encounter
Yeah.
on a day-to-day basis. So yeah, how do I model the Skellig way? For the problems I encounter on a day-to-day basis, I try to approach them as just like a genuine, thoughtful, compassionate person. I try to approach them um, without drama, without politics, without playing any kind of angle, and I just put myself in the other person's shoes of who might be closer to the problem that I'm trying to solve.
Hmm.
And I say, what would I need a teammate to do in order to um, fix this for me, or to make it more tolerable, or to
Hmm.
alleviate any kind of symptom?
Hmm.
And then I do that, or I try to do that.
Hmm.
And it might be stepping outside of my job responsibilities to make that happen, but that's okay. Like, it's okay if you see a puddle to pick up a mop and then to mop it up, even if it's not your job. If it solves a problem and it does so quickly and it makes your teammates' lives easier, then that should be good enough.
Yep,
So
that's awesome.
that is how I try to, I guess, model
Yeah.
the Skellig way.
For me, I think the caveat, first of all, on the Skellig Way, it's not that, I think it just speaks to, um, okay, what are the values and the way this group wants to operate? Because companies have a way about them. So can we be deliberate and prescriptive about this? Can we give managers a bit of context for how do you make a good decision? What should you keep in mind when you're making a decision? Who works well in leadership? So that's the kind of preface to what's the Skellig Way about. It's kind of to try to give people in management like you and engineers who are solving problems some kind of common understanding of our philosophy around like how we might approach the situation. And for for me, definitely not perfect, but usually the way I want to show up is, first of all, kind of I'd like to try to share my intentions around, especially if it's complicated. All right, what are my intentions here? How do I want to solve it so that it can be critiqued? And if someone can help me understand where I'm short-sighted, I'm not seeing it the right way, then I can adapt and change, especially if it's in the good of the for the good of the group. But then that is what kind of is the second element of like, when I'm thinking about the way of working, the way of managing, I'm thinking about like not just, okay, I've shared my intentions, but do I really understand the other individual's intentions? So am I assuming positive intent? So I love that one. I love that it made it as a Skellig value because it's really critical. Um, I do a lot of thinking about the second and third order consequences of a decision, and then if there's no second or third order consequences, I'm really trying to help push those decisions and responsibilities down into the organization. If there are second and third order consequences, like for example, setting a precedent on um, a new topic or making a decision that sets a precedent or creates a new element of sends a new signal for how we operate or something. Those have consequences, and we need to be able to think about yeah, exactly, like what's the knock-on effect of this. Um, and then the other one that I like to try to model is trying to start with the truth. And that can be, I think the only complexity is to starting with the truth is sometimes I like to be able to have the moment between somebody's just done something, you've got to correct it or you've got to address it, but like, okay, what do I actually think about it? Okay, let's assume that person was acting with positive intent first, and then let's work through, do I understand where they were coming from when they did this thing that rubbed someone else the wrong way or created this knock-on effect that has caused some adverse problem. Um, and when I go confronting the situation, then obviously starting with the truth, but doing so kind of as respectfully as possible. Hey, I'm sure you just meant well, but like you probably didn't realize. You know, any final thoughts from you, Greg?
No, no, this was nice and thought provoking. If it was an easy problem to solve, I think it would have been solved already, right? So uh,
It's
certainly
fun to
there's
work on big challenges, isn't it? And like it's so interesting. They're not just technical, they're not just business, it's all everything's connected, you know?
yeah, yeah, for sure. It's not one thing at all. Everything is so intertwined that's what makes them, I think, so difficult. Is
Hmm.
you change one thing and then it has
Yeah,
economic
yeah,
effects
yep.
or even just, I don't know,
Hmm.
technical effects or cultural implications. And yeah, and
Yeah,
it's like you're always working on a moving train, right? It never stops to
Yeah.
get put in shop that you can work on it. It's always actively being used. So
Yeah. It's probably, this is, but like for me, like in management, bonuses were always that. It's like it's so hard to like, how do you give a bonus? What's the incentive that you reward for knowledge workers? How do you do that well? And I'm not going to dive into it deeply now because number one, it's probably a boring topic for a lot of people other than people like me. Not like everyone wants a bonus and would love to get a bonus, but like what's the behavior you specifically incentivize? And then when the market changes and you're a good hammer for a certain type of nail, how do you change that incentive, or how do you adapt to the marketplace? Um,
mm-hmm.
so I think about that when you think about like where we're at today, all the incentives, who benefits, how do you change all of that? It's so complicated, and
Yeah. Yep.
blame the
And not
system, not the
everyone's going to
person.
agree with
Exactly.
with whatever you do.
Yeah.
So
Exactly. So, yeah, I think those kinds of things are, if you're small scale and you're a small company, you're thinking like, oh, let me give a bonus to some people. Like, can you take a second look at that maybe and try to see if you can like square up with them in another way where you bake it into the salary or you do something like that as opposed to,
mm-hmm.
because bonuses become very you need a lot of
They're good
forethought to do them
intentions,
well.
but there's a lot of other
Hmm.
strings attached, I'll say.
Yeah, exactly. So,
Or ways they're looked at, ways that people um,
yeah.
rely on them as part of their salary. And
Hmm.
a bonus should be a bonus, but when you standardize that everyone gets a bonus, it becomes expected, and then it's really not a bonus anymore. It's more of like a
Right. Right.
yeah,
And it's a good way to
whole other
keep.
topic.
It is a whole other topic, yeah, because oh my God, yeah, it is, because it's a whole strategy,
All right,
like companies use it to keep base pay low and stuff like that. Anyway, all right,
we'll sign off. So
sign off on that.
hey, thank you for listening, I guess, to this conversation between Paul and myself, just around cultural values and 4.0 and everything in between.
Hmm.
So
Thank you, Greg,
have a
for
wonderful
having it.
day, and
Hmm.
thanks thanks for listening, Mom. And
Good stuff.
thank you, everyone. Until next time.
Yep, thank you, Greg. Appreciate it. Take care. Bye.
Bye, Paul.